about understanding Treasury instrument, our group chose 3 instruments which are the T-bills from Japan, Repo Japan, and Japan government bond. My name is Wanzura Sofia binti Mazufika and my metric number is 255695. Today I would like to present about the definition. Firstly, Treasury bills of Japan. The Treasury bills of Japan are issued by the Japan government. A Treasury bill, a T-bill, is a short term for the Japan government to cover the debt obligation from the Treasury Department within 1 year or less than maturity date. The Treasury Department will make the sales of Treasury bills when auctioned by using a bidding process which are the non-competitive and competitive. Second, for the repurchase agreement from Japan, is a secondary bond market, also known Gensaki. For the similarities in the repurchase agreement, typically government bond. Repurchase agreement involving selling and buying the bond with the agreement to buy back the bond after the specific period. It known as a risk-free of raising fund against security as collateral to raise fund and a fund as collateral for borrowing securities. Third, the definition of Japan government bond. The Japan government bond is a bond that provided by the government of Japan to be issued. The Japan government will pay the interest until the maturity date for the bond. They have the financial securities market in Japan that is controlled by the Japanese government bonds. Next, I will present about the purposes. Firstly, the Treasury bills Japan. T-bills is one of the financial market used to raise short-term funds issued by the government. This instrument is the safest and low-risk investment instrument to the investor. The amount also fixed and the date of issue is predetermined. Highly negotiable instrument available in both primary and secondary financial market. Next, for the second purposes, repurchase agreement. The purpose creation of Gensaki in the secondary market or repurchase agreement is used for purchase and resale the medium-term and long-term corporate and government bond. The repurchase agreement also used to raise the short-term capital and also known as a tool of Central Bank Japan in open market operations. Repos also used for the lending, short-term borrowing, and also considered most safe investment due to the security. For the third, the purposes of Japan government bond, the basic objective, the JGB to the debt management policy are to ensure the stabilization and the smoothness issuance of the JGBs and to minimize the medium to the long-term financing costs. The Ministry of Finance need to issue the Japanese government bond depend on the market demand if to reach the target. If for the temporary extreme demand, the alternative are by increase the funding cost by spoil the expected of market participant or causing the distortion in the market. It also need to be focusing more on the stable and predicted issuance of the JGBs by considering medium to the long-term market demand. Next, I will present about the created of firstly, the Treasury bills of Japan are created to fund various public projects like a major project of construction in making highway or huge building which need a big amount of money to complete them. The Japan government will record them for the investor purchase a T-bills and issue the T-bills which are nominal amount will be paid on its maturity by the holders. The sales of purchase T-bill represent the borrowing and lending the funds. The investor will get the bills from the issuer of bank in Japan to generate funds from the bank's activities which are lending and borrowing. Next, for the created repurchase agreement Japan, repo is declared as collateral which is to ensure the safeness in the event of default of either counterparty, which is the lender is not able to recover the full amount of host fund by selling the bond if he, the borrower of funds, is default while the bond price falls during the contract period. The lender of the repo in Japan is a person who borrows and lends the funds in the contract. Repo is the important transaction between two parties as is it to secure the safeness money market instrument. Next, the created Japan government bond, JGB was issued by the Japanese government and used by their central bank to boost the inflation in the country. There are 3 types JGB which is the general bond, fiscal investment and loan program bond. Also, subsidy bond. JGB is very popular among the low-risk investor and for high-risk investor.
My name is Nuriziana Nabila binti Muhammad Izzuddin, number 2557887. I will present about the parties involved in the instrument that we are already picked. Okay, for the first one is the Treasury bills of Japan. Okay, the parties involved are issuer, principal dealer, and investor. Japan Treasury discount bills are issued by the Bank of Japan on the market in order to finance the activity of the organization. For the second one, super dealer, such as investment bank and financial institution, are used as a platform to help the issuer sell the Japanese Treasury bills on the market. The third one is investor. The aim of the investor invest in T-bills is to gain profit with a secure investment. Okay, for second one is the repurchase agreement of Japan. The parties involved are lender or investor lend money to the deficit parties and in condition that the borrower must secure it by collateral. Second one is borrower. It's known as a non-depository financial institution such as the investment and trust fund. A third party will be involving to facilitate in the transaction or known as a three-party repo. It also acts as intermediaries between the lender and the borrower of the repurchase agreement. For the Japanese government bond, the parties involved are issuer, purchaser, and underwriter. Purchaser government is also declared as a major role in the market because they borrow and lend the money to other institution or company that need money or in deficit part. Okay, the next one is right of each party. For Japanese treasury bills, first one, investee has right to decide whether the investor can purchase or sell their treasury bills in a certain date or certain condition. Second one is investor can require immediate liquidity if anything happened to the bank. Okay, for the Japanese repurchase agreement, lender or investor shall have the right to sell such security for profit if borrower fails to meet their agreement or bankrupt at the agreed duration. And for the borrower can repurchase the bond that he or she offered to the lender at the agreed period. The third one is Japanese government bond. The issuer, which are Bank of Japan, is able to repurchase the government bond with the exchange of the profit to the purchaser at the negotiated rate. Second one, underwriter has the right to resell Japan government bond either directly to the public or through a broker such as trust fund or investment bank. The last one is the purchaser have right to be compensated first if the bankruptcy arises. Okay, next is responsibility and obligation of parties. For the first one is Japan Treasury bills. The issuer responsible to sell the securities. The dealer is responsibility as market maker, and for investor they can build long-term credibility with the investment community and maintain a loyal shareholder base and enhance the long-term shareholder value. The next one is for the repurchase agreement. The next one is for the repurchase agreement. A lender or investor must be responsible to the care, diligence, and skills, and they also can help the borrower to make decisions, and they also must consent to act reasonably and ethically. For the borrower, they can sign the promissory note and remember to keep in touch with their lender or loan services. And for the third party, they are responsible to enhance the progression of the transaction and administration, and they must not share the evidence to the others. Okay, for the Japanese government bond, the special participant is also part of the parties involved in the Japanese government bond, and they have many responsibility that they need to bear, which are bidding responsibility, purchasing responsibility on the secondary market, and the information sharing. Okay, first one, special participant shall bid for a sufficient amount, which is at least 5% of the amount anticipated at fair price in each auction. The second, they need to buy and underwrite at least a defined share of the overall volume of the planned issue in each zone in the auction for the proceed. Then, special participants shall bring sufficient liquidity to the secondary market for Japanese government bond. And lastly, they need to provide the Ministry of Finance with market information and related transaction.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Nurul Atika binti Abdul Latif and my metric number is 255922. Alright, I will continue about my part, which is the risk of parties in the treasury bills in Japan. So the first risk is interest rate risk. When the interest rate increase, the demand will be decreased because of less attractive. And then the currency risk. When the national currency decline, the value of treasury bills also will be falls. And then market risk, which is bank will expose to the market risk when the other instrument offered features that are less risk. Alright, next, for the returns and benefit to the parties in the treasury bills in Japan, the investee will receive the benefit from the treasury bills if there has nothing risk on the investment such as inflation. For the investor, when the maturity period is longer, the return to the parties will rise. After that, treasury bills is known as the most safety returns investment. Then treasury bills is also known as a risk-free rate on the short-term treasury bills due to lowest return. And lastly, treasury bills is a high liquidity instrument. For the pricing and mechanism for treasury bills in Japan, the treasury bills will purchase at auction and will be priced by a bidding process. Then the competitive bid will be setting a price at a discount based on the treasury bills at a par value, while the non-competitive bids auction will allow the investors to put a price to the bid and will receive the yield based on the average auction price. Alright, for the risk of parties in the repurchase agreement in Japan, the buyer and lender will face the credit risk and interest rate risk. Then the seller or borrower will face the security risk and also the profit risk. And lastly, the third party will face the same as the buyer and or lender, which is credit risk and interest rate risk. Alright, for the return and benefit to the parties in the repurchase agreement in Japan, the benefit for the lender or investor, the government will lend a hand to make any home of ownership easier. The benefit for the borrower is the chance to receive the funds from the investor for a randomly period of time, and they also get the benefit for the market liquidity if the repurchase agreement is good. And lastly, the benefit for the third party, which is rise up the resilience of the market liquidity. Alright, for the pricing mechanism for repurchase agreement in Japan, there is the formula how we calculate the repurchasing price, and they also stated about the margin ratio for securities in the repurchase agreement, which is followed year by year. Alright, for the risk of parties in Japan government bond, the risk for investee is the Bank of Japan purchases also had risky which negatively impact in Japan government bond trading. And for the investor, the market liquidity tend to decline when the share of domestic sovereign bonds held by the central bank increase. After that, the risk on the price in Japan's government bond, which the ratio is high price over low price. And lastly, the risk in high return will attend to the higher risk. So if the investor expect to have a higher return, they will face the higher risk. Alright, for the return and benefit to the parties in the government, in the Japan government bond, the first benefit is Japanese government will pay interest and full price on the bondholder. After that, the bond was fully backed by the Japanese government, and Japanese government bond also have a low risk and higher security of investment. Then the pricing mechanism for Japan government bond, the bond has a par value and it can be traded either at par, premium or at discount. After that, the price is not fixed because it can fluctuate as the bond's price change.
Hello and hi everyone. My name is Nofatin Shazwani binti Zakaria, metric number 256084. So I will continue with my part, which is how the instrument is traded. So for treasury bills, in a short term, the instrument will be sold in primary market by public offering via competitive price auction. The bill will be discounted in a Japanese currency and will be redeemed at the par value when matured. So for the medium term in primary market, it will be sold in the competitive and non-competitive auction by public offering also. Then for the long-term treasury bills will be sold in the primary market by competitive and non-competitive auction. Same with the medium term and the syndicate and under syndicate underwriting. So for the super long term in primary market, it will be sold by 15-year public offering via Dutch style yield auction. For 20-year, it will be sold in public offering via competitive price auction, and for 30 years, it in public offering via Dutch style yield auction. So for repurchase agreement, they are traded by two ways. Which for the first way is they have to borrow funds against bond as collateral. Means in exchange for high creditworthiness bonds as collateral, investors can offer their funds to the bond leader. This will favor all parties, which is by utilize their bonds as collateral. Bond dealer can lessen their financing rates and lower the credit risk premium that investor required. The next way is by borrowing bond against capital that is cash assumed as collateral. In the second deal, the bond dealer may enter into a repo transaction to cover their short position by borrowing the required bond against cash collateral, and this allows the investor to minimize his or her financing costs effectively. GC repos refers to the formal lending and borrowing transaction, whereas SC repos refers to the latter for lending and borrowing bonds. So for GC repos, the underlying securities are not stated, while they are defined in SC repos when the parties enter into an agreement. Next is Japan government bond JGB. The price and yield for the JGB used to trade will be set as benchmark to avoid the riskier debt in any country is valued. The trading hours for JGB is from 12:30 p.m. to 2 p.m. Trading unit in 50,000 JPY in par value. Types of order is limit orders, which market orders are not available. Trading methods used by JGB is orders are accepted only via target, which is electronic document submission system of TSE. The individual auction for each issue, price priority and time priority are applied same as stock. So I will continue with my second part, which is there any secondary market for these three instruments? For treasury bills, there has a secondary market, as it is easy to transfer to the secondary market. For repurchase agreement, there is no secondary market because the repurchase agreement applies only to direct placement. An investor may only sell bond and or securities that have been exchanged for money in the bond dealer become bankrupt or fails to comply with their agreement to return the funds received along with a refined repo rate. In addition, the lender cannot sell the bond since the bond is still in the name of the bond dealer and will be enforced only if the borrower fails to return the investor's fund. Next, for Japan government bond, there has secondary market, which is can divided into transactions which are the stock exchange and transaction that non-over-the-counter transaction. The price of the JGB will be counted through a negotiation between the parties as follow the principle in the OTC market. OTC also has self-regulatory regulation by the Japan Security Dealer as Association to control and maintain the fair and smooth OTC bond transaction. So I will continue with my last part, the application for these three instruments. So for treasury bills, Japan treasury bills can be purchased through a dealer or broker at bank or buy online from the website. T-bills also are issued by auction bidding, which occurs every week. Treasury bills used to be a paper bills, but nowadays it already used only in an electronic form, means there is no paper bills anymore. Treasury bills can be buy bid. There are two types of bidding, which is competitive and non-competitive bid. For those who are not expert in security trading, means who are not have any experience in trading a security, they can use non-competitive bidding because it is the simplest way to purchase this instrument. In competitive, you have specified the return that you want to get. If the interest you specify is lower than the original rate stated by the auction, then the bid will be accepted. However, if the rate specified is higher than the stated rate, so the bid will be rejected. So now let's move into repurchase agreement. Repurchase agreement used to purchase and resell usually the government bonds and corporate bonds. The buyer will purchase a repo from a seller, means they have agreed within a specific period with one price, and the buyer will sell back the bond at different price because they want to gain profit and the maturity date, but during the time the buyer or lender can sell the bond to the third party if he was default or to cover up the loss. So basically in the repurchase agreement is purchase and resell bonds with 4 basic function, which is invest cash with the assets as collateral. For the first one, it turns to the cash with asset as collateral, means it is the safe investment, and the second one, it is cheap borrowing. The buyer can borrow cash to remain financed for a long position and the asset as collateral. The third one is yield enhancement. Yield enhancement means it can earn return or profit by lending the asset in the market that can be reinvested. So the last one is short selling and short covering, means it is the last is a party in repo can borrow in order to sell and establish a short position to settle a sale agreed by both parties. Okay, now let's move into the last instrument, which is Japan government bond. We can purchase JGB at primary market in public offering. It also can be purchased by corporation through financial institution and foreign securities firm licensed for the underwriting. And next, the corporation through financial institution and foreign securities resident and non-resident local or foreign securities. For the resident and non-resident individual and corporate investors through financial institutions can local or foreign securities firm. This JGB can be redeemed at par upon maturity. Thank you.
So I will continue the presentation with Treasury Bill Japan's operation in bank with Treasury. This is we know that used by ALM, or known as asset liability management in bank treasury operation. They use this instrument to managing the risk occurred in the transaction. Because by using this method, the Treasury Department can control the risk. This instrument also known as used to supervise and revising asset and liability. This instrument is declared as a strategic method of optimize the asset and liability to make them more efficient. And this use of this instrument is considered and compensate with financial solution, which can help them to get achievable amount of forecast met. And then the guideline regulating the Treasury Bill Japan. We have the eligibility of collateral will be based on the following principle. There are 3 principles, which is to maintaining the soundness of the bank asset. Second one, they utilize market information, and then 2, ensuring the smoothness of business operation of the bank and efficient to use the collateral. And then general eligibility standard for collateral, we have 3, which is marketability, creditworthiness, and other eligibility standard. Then the regulating agency that provide the Treasury Bill Japan. 1. Bank of Japan, responsible for issuing and managing currency and treasury securities, enforcing monetary and fiscal policy. And then 2, Securities and Exchange Surveillance Commission. Okay, so next is the Repurchase Agreement Japan operation in bank treasury. The fund supplying operation to purchase or sell Japanese government security with repurchase agreement. Operation are usually conducted by a conventional auction. So there are 2 outline, which is the principal and also the auction. We have 4 for the principal, which is 1, location of purchase or sell. 2, securities to be purchased or sold, and the third one, repurchase agreement. The fourth one, method for auction. For the outline of the auction is we have three. First, auction guideline offer. Second, submission of bids, and third, acceptance of bids. And then for the guideline regulating the repurchase agreement Japan, repo is a transaction should be aligned with the principle of maintaining the market professionalism and integrity due to report market is operating in a sound and orderly manner. License of financial institution must be clear from any circumstance enter into transaction in order to limit the availability of collateral with the intention of creating a mistake or distorted market in repo and the other underlying securities. And then the regulating agency that provide repurchase agreement Japan, the regulating agency for repurchase agreement in Japan is TBMA or ISMA Global Master Repurchase Agreement 2000 version. They use this when the parties may enter into transaction in which one party, which is a seller, agrees to sell the other, which is a buyer, and both are acting through a design office. And then buyer has simultaneous agreement to sell the seller securities for the securities at a certain date or okay, so the last instrument chosen in our group is Japan Government Bond or JGB. So the JGB operation in bank treasury main issuing method of Japanese government bond is through public auction, and the syndicate system has been repealed at the end of fiscal 2005. New issue shall be decided by means of a competitive price auction once JGB is released via public auction. Public auction are currently used to issue interest-bearing bond with maturities of 2, 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 and 40 years, and treasury bill with maturity period between 6 months to 1 year. Okay, for the guideline regulating the JGB, we have two. For the first one is Japanese government focus on to contribute the smooth and efficient transaction, and the second one is concerning the delivery and settlement practices. And then the regulating agency that provide Japan government bond, created for the securities in Japan that has issued many rules and market participant practices for participant in Japan market bond. Some of the oldest JSDA self-regulatory introduced as a guidance by the financial authority. Main categories of the rules and guidelines is self-regulatory rules complying with law and regulation maintain the fairness of any transaction. Tokyo Stock Exchange self-regulatory fulfill the duties of the operation in the securities market. So in conclusion, the money market is a place where financial institutions increase their liquidity and invest their surplus fund. And all aspects in operation of trading the instrument are more efficient where they are following all